house a fixed route operation as well as a paratransit operation were contracted out. So there was a core staff, and we had contracted those services out to an organization called People for People, a nonprofit organization. Pros and cons of contracting. When we brought our fixed route operation in-house 2 years ago, we realized a significant savings. The paratransit piece is still contracted out, and mainly for the reason we don't have the fleet to accommodate that. There'd be a capital cost to obtain the fleet. Our facility is quite small at the current time. They operate out of a base away from our facility. But pros and cons to contracting out. In a rural area like Grant County, we had a difficult time getting folks to bid on our contracts. Just very difficult. One reason is because we're incredibly rural. In fact, Grant Transit has out of the 31 public transportation properties in the state, has the longest route, and it's 78 miles one way. It originates in Moses Lake and goes up to Grand Coulee. And so, you know, as we call it, butts and seats, you know, that's what we're trying to do, is to generate that ridership. And it just looks really different in a rural area. But I would definitely suggest looking into contracting out certain components. If it's with a neighboring transit property, that makes it much more easier.
And for example, we cover an area into Skagit, and Skagit doesn't cover that area to Deception Pass, and you don't provide paratransit in that area. There may be an opportunity to contract that. The other thing we could also consider is even in the, let's say the Oak Harbor area, I see the transit vehicles moving around, and then they have to stop it. But there's a lot of travel between this station and the south end and the north end that's, even though it's a service area, it's still an empty bus going long distances. And if we potentially look at a contract system that even covers, let's say, Oak Harbor, and they're smaller vehicles, because as the staff knows, paratransit ridership per vehicle is, at least from my experience and observation, pretty much one person per vehicle for those big vehicles. We may not need to be there. It may be cheaper for our community and still have the same service by having contracted out with smaller vehicles. But it's certainly worth us taking a look at that possibility.
Mr. Jeff?
Go ahead.
I had some questions. How often are those fare boxes emptied at Grand Transit?
Every other week.
So they're secured by a lock, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the coaches are secured, the ones that have the fare boxes and there's cash in them?
Yes.
So you said every other week they're emptied?
Every other week they're emptied.
And who are they emptied by the vehicle maintenance employees?
No, it is by 2 administrative staff, and they would go out in a pair to do that process, yes.
And then those monies are taken to a safe somewhere?
Yes, exactly. They're brought into the facility, and it's time for when GARDA would come on site. By the time the fares were emptied into bank bags and zipped, the paperwork is ready for GARDA. Like clockwork.
Who does the counting of the cash?
GARDA does.
They do.
So that's all out of sight, out of mind.
Charge 30. Would you say $36 a bag?
Per bag, yes. It was actually $160 a flat rate for the month, and then it was $21.80 per bag for pickup. And we would generally have 3 to 4 bags every other week.
And you said it comes out to about $500 to $550 a month?
Roughly, yes.
Okay. Are there any script tickets? I mean, can anybody, in lieu of cash, they could put in?
Not a Grant Transit Authority, and that's why it was quite simple process for us, is because it was cash only.
Okay. All right. And there's no break for seniors or special needs people, disabled or anything? That's it? Right, and are there people that get on with wheelchairs? Are you wheelchair equipped?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. And what about non-payment affairs? Are the operators record people that go on and say, I don't have any money, but I'm riding?
Absolutely, yes. There is a fair policy in place, but it comes down to common sense.
Sure.
You pull up and there's a young woman with 2 kids and it's raining and
Right.
they don't have a fare. What do you do? The bus is going in the same direction
Sure.
anyway.
Sure. Tell them not to argue,
Yes.
ask one time and then, right?
Absolutely.
And then you track the non-payments.
Track the
that's-
non-payments.
That's part of your loss on that.
Yes.
Okay. One last thing. The paratransit work is contracted out?
Yes.
You said? To a nonprofit?
It happens to be to a nonprofit organization, and it's simplified as well. For approximately 1,300 to 1,400 trips a month, we pay a flat $40,000 a month. And that would be to meet all of our ADA obligation for those folks that are eligible.
Yeah.
About $480,000 a month. And that came out to about, I believe, $32 a trip is what
Right.
that ended up.
Yeah. It's the most expensive of all the public transit is the paratransit.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
is the nonprofit, are they making any money on this?
Well, they've been, they have a number of grants with
Yeah.
DOT and other state agencies throughout the state, but with us, they were making it work.
Good.
Yes.
Well, thanks for the information.
You bet.
Good questions, Lance.
So let me follow up on something Lance had said. So if you were to go out to a process, you would have to do a procurement process, and there's a strict set of rules in terms of procuring contracted service. So you couldn't just go to a single bidder and say, do you want to do this? You would have to actually go out through a very public procurement process, which Matt could probably give us a lot of information on it.
And that would also apply to fixed routes. For example, for this discussion, between Stanwood and Skagit Station, we advertise and Skagit could bid on it if they care to, or a private organization, or community transit could bid on it.
Well, for Skagit, you've actually got another option. You can do, under the Interlocal Act, you can do an interlocal agreement with another PTBA, so it would be a different approach if it was another agency, so.
So we have some options to improve, and I'm going to just say from a business point of view, our bottom line through efficiencies and collaboration. I would like to hear from Watcom and Tammy. Yeah, Tammy. You are involved in the finance management up there, County Eastwood.
Mm-hmm.
Any relation to Eastwoods on Whidbey Island?
I don't think so.
Yes, right.
But that's barely possible.
Excuse me. Can you add anything to this conversation about fare collection and the finance reality that you guys have experienced with your process?
Well, for me, the idea of a fare-free system is kind of out of my frame of reference, only having grown up in Bellingham, because we've always had fares. I can remember as a little kid having bus tokens, and the operators having the little click things on their side, and I thought that was so cool when I was a little kid. So I just don't have any experience with that, but since I've been at WTA, one of the big things that I've been a part of is we're changing over all of our fare boxes and hoping to move to smart cards. And I started in July a year ago, and we were supposed to have our smart cards up and running by, thinking fall quarter last year. We still don't have working smart cards because the technology, although when we were told it was ready to go, and basically we thought we were buying an off-the-shelf product, hadn't even been developed yet for the fare boxes that we wanted to use and with the type of smart cards that we have. And so it's been a constant struggle. I know in some of the discussions that our general manager Pete has had with Skagit, they're saying, let us work out the bugs so that you don't have to go through this process, because it's painful and it's expensive. And our contract for the fare boxes is about for the fare boxes, for the whole process, you know, getting smart cards set up and everything and going is about $2.5 million, and we're about halfway through it, and we're holding on to a lot of the contractor's money, and that doesn't even seem to phase them. It's it's been very slow and very painful. The one good thing about fare boxes, I know that Skagit has one step older version than what we have, isn't that right? Is that we do get really accurate information, and we have, our fare collection works in a lot the same way as what Greg's been telling you. We empty our fare boxes a little bit more often. We empty them, the hostlers empty them every night, but they never touch the money. The fare boxes are put into a vault, opened electronically, and the money's dumped into a vault. And then twice a week, we have people from our office go out into our vault room, into the money room, and we have cameras recording, and we have always has to be 2 people, and they dump the money into big linen bags that with string ties, and the strings are pulled, and then a little lead crimp is tied around it, so they're closed right then. And mobile armored comes, picks them up, takes them in. And we've been tracking, since we put the fare boxes in, almost 2 years ago now, we've been tracking how accurate they are, and it is, we've had pickups where it's within, $10, and a lot of times that $10 are coins that were rejected. So they're very accurate, and it does give us really good, really accurate information in terms of tracking money, looking at ridership, things like that. And so, 2 years into this process, we're still using magnetic passes. So it's.
What was that last sentence?
I said 2 years into this process, we're still using mag stripe passes. So.
Those are prepaid passes.
Yes. Yeah, and we do have a fare structure that does have discounts for seniors, veterans, people 65 and older are half price, people 75 and older are free, children under 8 are free. We have students are half price with their student ID, and so they can buy a pass that's half price for, and that works for everything, by quarterly or monthly at this point.
And we married our fares with
We did.
Wacom, so the same thing is on Skagit. You can pay $3 for a one-day pass, get on a Wacom bus, come down to Skagit, ride every one of our routes, and get back on a Wacom bus and get back home.
So, Mr. Chair, can I
Yes, please.
say something here? One of the discussions we did have is about structuring a fare system, and really looking, there was some concern brought up by the board before about the impacts on special needs individuals, people with disabilities, low income, that sort of thing. And so you have the ability as a board to really decide what those rates are for low income. And for instance, intercity transit, when they just recently raised their fares, they raised it on the fixed route, but chose not to raise it on the paratransit routes, for instance. There was some talk brought up earlier about the impact on students going to Skagit community colleges. There are, throughout the state, agreements set up with colleges where they can basically prepay for rides for their students with their student ID. And so that's something to consider in terms of making sure that students are able to ride the buses. So looking at each individual group and how best they could ride the system and be able to cut down the barriers that exist, I think is an important discussion to have.
So they the students present a student card.
Yeah, so.
And for that quarter or semester,
Yeah.
they get a pass for that at a nominal fee.
So I'll take, in Olympia, there's the Evergreen State College.
Right.
And basically, as part of your student fee, you pay a certain amount of money, I think it's like $25. And
For a semester.
For a quarter.
Quarter.
And you get a sticker.
Yep.
And when you get on the bus, you show your student pass, and that gets you.
And it's photo ID.
And it's photo ID, exactly. And those work differently throughout the state. The UW has a much more complicated system. Everything's more complicated in King County because it's much more integrated. I mean, so their student pass gets them access to every type of transit in King County, including Washington State Ferries, Kitsap Transit. So it's much more developed in terms of their student pass. But student pass programs, I know both Skagit and Whatcom have them as well, exist throughout the state.
And then for, like with Skagit and Whatcom, for people who are Medicare qualified, they just use their Medicare card? Medicaid card?
Okay.
Medicaid,
Yeah.
or whatever card they
Yeah,
they
we-
just show
we
the
have-
card. So you're not exchanging money or tickets or anything like that?
We do, on our fixed route, a Medicaid card, they can show that and they can become reduced fare eligible. And then they can buy a reduced fare pass. Or
Okay.
if they just show that when they get onto the bus, then they only have to pay 50 cents rather than.
So you're doing cards and cash?
Yeah, we do both.
Both of them? Okay, good. Now, I have another question for actually all of you. And Reed, by the way, when we started this thing, I really failed to welcome all of you here, and thank you for your time. We just got jumping into this thing a little bit too quickly, I think. So I appreciate you coming and helping us with this. And Dale, you and Pete have been really helpful with Ken and meeting with us, and it doesn't go unnoticed. I would like to know what your percentage of your net rate of return, actually it really wouldn't be a real rate of return, but what your net return is on your gross operation cost, and do you include amortization of vehicles in that, and how do you measure this 8% or 12% or whatever it is? I'm going to start with Dale.
Well, ours is 6%, and we do.
It's what?
6%. We get 6% return on our fare boxes, on our local routes. It's higher on our connectors, it's a little over 10. But we do put that in our budget. It's about $410,000. As far as what it costs us to collect a fee, we have the same system that Whatcom has. It's basically the two employees, obviously the capital for the vault and for the probe machine and whatnot. But we have two individuals twice a week that go out in a vault with cameras, and they just dump the money into the bags and it's picked up by an armored car. That takes about an hour, half hour each. So it's the labor of that. Administratively, we have a balance sheet that comes out from the fare box that has Tammy mentioned the $10 difference. That's part of our overhead that we put into our administrative fees.
Now, that your 6%, it all washes out. Are you including the cost of administration, the cost of the vehicle, cost of maintenance, fuel, everything that goes in there? Probably no value added to that formula for, let's say, depreciation for your building.
Depreciation is not in there.
But you're talking about all of your staff, all of your overhead, all your maintenance, fuel, amortization of that vehicle, the replacement of that vehicle?
No, the fuel is that's to the vehicle. That the fare cost is to our fare system as a whole. I mean, it's a separate line item in our budget. Does that make sense? I mean,
Well,
and then the administrative cost for collecting, for the employees to go collect the money, that's in administrative budget.
You're talking about an administrative cost on 8%, so it doesn't include the driver of the vehicle?
No.
No, it doesn't include fuel. So it's a substantially smaller return when you include what it really costs to put that vehicle on.
If you put the whole, yeah.
Okay.
But it wouldn't change whether you had fares or not. I mean, as far as the vehicle and its cost.
And the cost of operating the vehicle and the driver, no.
Sure, whether it's fares or not.
It just, no, I agree with that, Lance. When people start throwing these percentage numbers around, I like to know what that percentage number
Right.
relates to. You know, if you put it for every time you open the door, it's going to be a way different number. Tammy, could you, excuse me, do you have?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
may I ask a question? Dale, do you guys account for the maintenance time of the fare boxes?
Mhm.
Okay.
We have one individual that's all he does, that's his job is maintaining the fare boxes.
And any additional security as far as facility or whatever related to fare collection?
That's the initial capital cost of the vault. I mean, we probe the bus, the vault comes out as it does at WTA. We don't touch it, it goes inside, it's emptied electronically. The money is absolutely secured, no one touches it until the car comes and gets it.
So I'm going to state this in just a slightly different way because Lance triggered some thought here in my head. It's the decision is fair or no fair. With no fair, you still have all of the administrative costs, the vehicle costs, all that kind of stuff, the building costs. Now, if you add the fare to this formula, there's going to be a cost for adding the fare. And so you're getting 6% net from the cost of adding the fare. That's what I'm trying to simplify this.
That's what our 2014 budget was.
Okay, good.
So Ryan, when you said we were looking at an 8%, were you saying an 8% on the cost of adding the fare or an 8% on the cost of running the entire system?
Just on the fare itself.
Just adding the fare, the cost of adding the fare.
Now that's important because, you know, the argument can be made that it costs more to, you don't gain anything by adding the fare because you have all of these other overhead items, and so the numbers can be tilted any way you want to. I want to know what it's going to cost to add the fare.
Can I speak to that?
Yes, please.
Studies all over this is something I've studied closely for my entire career. Studies across the country historically will show you that small systems you're losing money ultimately with fare collection. It's determined by your ridership, you know, the number of trips, the number of people paying fares, what your fare rate is. Once a system gets big enough where you've got the volume of ridership, then that starts to turn into a positive cash flow. Part of what you have to separate out there, as Dale pointed out, is your capital costs. Fare boxes, new ones, what we're saying, $12,000 to $14,000 a fare box. However, if you get a grant for it and the feds pick up 80% of the cost, you know, certainly that's reduced. But you subtract that out, all the costs with, like I was asking, maintenance of the fare boxes, collection of the fares, security. You never see a driver get assaulted at a fare-free system. Of course, it happens, I don't want to say all the time, but the larger the system, you have assaults, that's part of your cost of fare collection. So bigger systems, the bigger you are, fares definitely adds to the bottom line. Once you guys are doing a great job asking these questions of taking those out. The smaller the system it is, study after study will show you it does not break even. It becomes not a business decision, but a political decision. Dale's, I think, agency, and I'm going to just speculate, is at that size where you can generate, you've got enough ridership and a high enough fare that your net rate of return would just say 6%.
Yeah, we're in the black now.
Yeah, you'll see it on bigger systems where it's up to 20%. Across the country, it's usually around that 14 to 18% for bigger systems. It drops down the smaller the system goes to a point where the really small systems, you're losing money to collect fares. So for us, for example, MTA has been a fare-free system since its inception, except starting back 10 years or 15 years ago, they started with adding fares with the out-of-county service. So with that, it's small enough, that portion of, we're not adding any more staff people to do that. We've worked that into our maintenance time, our finance time, so we don't have a dedicated person to maintaining fare boxes or collecting those. So we have a positive rate of return because we've not added, we're already having those employees doing their jobs, and then they add, there's 15 minutes in their job per day or whatever to collect a small amount of fares. So our rate of return is about 6% as well, but that's only because it's out of county. If we started doing that system-wide for us, we would then be hiring on the extra people, and it would not result in a positive cash flow.
So if we had fares, let's say on the March Point route, and let's say the number one, the long routes in here, Mike, I'd be curious if it would, we would be collecting positive cash flow on just those routes, or is this going to be an experiment with introducing fares, and there's going to be a cost for introducing fares?
Well, it depends on your ridership, as Brad pointed out, but I think initially you would be at a slight positive revenue source, for the simple reason that with those 9 boxes, we gave you extra cash boxes.
Right.
You can pull them out, no one's going to touch them, and then you take them to, and as Greg pointed out, have the armored car pick it up. Your cost, your overhead is very, very little compared to what we are doing. But you know, we made the decision to go electronic to be able to be good partners with, you know, and we operate into Everett. So we got Everett Transit, we got Community, we got Sound, so we wanted to mirror what they were doing. It took us several years to get out of the red at the cost of those fare boxes, but we did get a grant to initially put them in, but now we're running in the black.
And that's what I'm kind of thinking is going to help us, as you mentioned, Ryan, geez, is the fare box may help us get future grants to implement a magnetic card or key card system to go into I've said it.
As Tammy pointed out, there is a backside of this too. All your data from your ridership, to your revenue hours, to your costs, everything comes out of that machine. So that
is a big item to me. It really is. I want to, you know, we can do precise calculations from a random point and come up with a number that we want. I like to have good data going into it that helps us make the decision that we have to make and what it's really costing us.
To clarify, the fare boxes they've been given are the diamonds, right?
They're manual diamonds,
okay.
Yes.
So those are manual boxes. They do no data collection.
Right.
It's just a simple put the money in it. And there's tons of because everybody's changed over to electronic fare boxes.
Yeah. You
can pick up enough of those for you. I probably could get you 100 of them back in Colorado with a phone call at probably $50 a piece.
Get his phone number.
All right. So you can pick those up. But I think part of our recommendation is both the political and the practical side. Implement this with your commuter service. You need to do that to, you know, with all the reasons that have been cited. Then study it and see how it's working. And then you know, if you decide to make that transition to partial routes, a whole system, fixed route only, whatever, you've got some good data to work with. You can charge Ken to, and Paul to make sure they've got good numbers on that reporting and what it's netting out after a year or two. And then meanwhile, you're having that discussion with the community to say, you know, where do we want to go with this? That's why the approach we took. I think, you know, going in all or none in response to a political situation, I'm not sure is the wisest choice. But also the realization of doing nothing, I agree. I don't think that's an option either for you.
Thank you, Brent. And Jill was trying to step in here for a second.
I know what happens when you get president, so you should.
With that, Lance.
Oh, it's a classic. I was just thinking that, you know, a lot of the public will be supportive of the system, however it's set up, and there'll be those that won't. I think it's going to be critically important, whichever way we decide to go, or the board decides to go, is to have those information things out in the coaches. Do the coaches have little racks there where you can put the, no? Well, I think if they would be available out there for the public to explain a lot of this, where we get the subsidies from. I mean, the tax and this and that, especially coming in as Island Transit is into, you know, partial pay on certain routes and stuff, and eventually, of course, that will expand. But to be able, the best way we can, to explain why this is a requirement now, and how public and private transit agencies, well, public certainly, no one goes into this business to make a profit. I mean, it's impossible. And as you all know, over 75% of it is subsidized, so, and in some cases more than that. But for the public, all they care about basically is that they want to go from point A to point B, and but especially in a system that has never had it before, it's so important that I think we try to get the best education out there for the public to understand. Thank you.
We printed a trifold information wheel right next to our rider guides. So people, the rider guide, they get what's coming and as far as theirs go. We did that several months before theirs.
Yeah.
Paul, you and Ken talked about putting that in the 411, that this right has been reinstituted or sustained by the grant, and to continue it, we should add, and it will be potentially by future fairs if we institute a fair system. But at the least we should be telling people this is dependent on the grant, and keep them informed in that bus vehicles all the time, because that's the reality of the 411C and the 411W. It's surviving by grant. Okay, now Jill's next.
So I just can't get my head around the fair thing and how it loses money, and I understand what you're saying. But in business, when you price a product and you're delivering a service and so let's say that 85% of the product that you're trying to buy is paid for by the public. Why don't you set the price, the fare, to cover the additional 15% cost? So I mean, this is the part that is really difficult for me, is we're saying, well, it's a $1 fare, it's a $2 fare, because we don't want to lose ridership. But we're willing to design it, and you're saying you can design a fare collection system and you're going to lose money. But in life, people pay up to the point that they can't pay for something that they want, right? From a business standpoint, I cannot get my head around how this doesn't work like a business. I don't get it.
Because it's a political decision.
Well, I get that. I hear what you're saying, but from a business standpoint, an organizational standpoint, how is it that every single community runs a transit system subsidized by the taxpayers at a loss, and then what you're saying is that the cost of collecting also, unless you have the level of participation, I mean, why can't you set your rate high enough to make it pay for itself? I literally don't understand how economics don't work in this situation. This isn't like sheriff's deputies. This isn't like, I totally don't get it. I don't understand how basic economics can't work in transit.
Jill, no one could afford to ride a bus.
Yeah. Well, then, I guess my biggest question is why do we have it? If nobody can afford it.
Because the fares only provide a small segment of the cost. No matter whether the fares were free, I mean, if you could collect them for free, they still would be a small segment of the cost of the system.
I don't know how to ask what I'm asking better, but I understand that the fares can't pay for the whole system. I do not understand how the fares can't pay for the fare collection system more. It is against every economics class I've ever taken that this doesn't work. That you're not setting the rate right, then the ridership falls down. Well, then at some point, something about transit isn't communicating that it costs you more than $4 in gas to get from Whidbey to Camino. It costs you more. I mean, is it a messaging problem? Is it I don't mean to be dense, but there is no reason that you can't set a fare to cover your costs, because we do that with every single product line in the United States. Every single product line covers its costs. How can this not do that?
If I may.
Yeah, somebody needs to help me, because
when a fireman goes out to fight a fire, do you charge the resident?
This isn't that though.
But it's a tax base, right? And when you pay for roads, you pay for fire departments, you pay for any of the public services, isn't it not something that the community contributes to?
But you're looking at this as fire, as like a public service, and what I'm looking at is a business expense, and we're saying that this business expense can't pay for itself.
It does. If you take all the transit systems around the country, from the tiniest systems to the largest systems, you'll find out all larger systems, it's definitely a positive contribution. that gets smaller and smaller and then flips over into a negative once you get into a very small system.
So it's
Okay,
a model
because-
problem. It's a model problem because like anything else that's regionalized, you need urban areas to support rural
Well,
areas.
like rural, you know, when we're so, in Mason County is the same, we're so stretched out that, you know, instead of having a bus of 20 riders that are going from Shelton to Brennan, it's a, you know, it's a 3 riders or 4 riders, because it's just the popular 60,000 people in Mason County, and you take, you know, maybe we get 6-7% of that population that uses transit. So those numbers get down. People still need to get to those locations. We only run it the route, you know, twice a day, but the numbers get down small enough where it costs you more.
If you were to partner with Thurston, would your model work?
We partner, for example, in that service with Jefferson. Jefferson meets us right at the, well, roughly at the county line.
Maybe I said partner wrong. If the model was that rural areas and urban areas operated under a bigger umbrella rather than just county-specific transit systems, does this model pencil out where you have the revenue that's generated from the urban areas where it's more profitable and the higher cost of the rural areas and the ridership evens out on the...
But I think that's one of the things as the industry evolves that is going to be looked closer at, as well as the relationship between school bus transportation and public transportation. When you got 2 fleets, you got 2 administrative staffs, 2 maintenance staffs, and all of those, you really need to have that. Keep in mind, you know, historically up until the 1960s, it was all private transportation. It was all private carriers. And what happened with the automobiles and the automobile industry bought out all these systems, so encouraged people to move over to automobiles. The systems that were left when the 60s rolled around were all losing money, and so that's where everything switched over to urban mass transit and out of the private sector. And so people were used to paying fares. They've been paying a fare for a private system, now we're just switching over to a public system. And as communities grew and had to re-establish, and now you're looking at all the cities that are going back in, putting in trolley systems on tracks, places where they had tracks 50 years ago, and redoing that. That it's now in the country, I think there's about 45 systems that are fare-free. Most of those systems, about 30 of them, are either tied with colleges, where it's a contract with the university that says, because the way our university works, the population, the density, we're just going to pay, you know, write you a check and you provide the service. The rest of them are at resorts. Colorado has several of them, because it doesn't work with the guy in his ski parka and his gloves and his gear to try and dig out a quarter in the snow to pay the fare. So it's under a contract basis. There's probably, I think, about 8 to 10 systems in the country that are truly fare-free systems, that are not tied with a contract with a ski resort or that kind of thing, or with a university. Missoula, for example, Montana just went to a fare-free system, but the way they did that is the businesses and the university all are, it's a 3-year pilot project, they're all contributing to cover that cost of what the fares were going to cost. So when you asked your original question of, you reversed it saying, you know, everybody's doing this, you know, so is there anybody really fare free? It gets down to I don't know how many thousands of systems are in the country, but it gets down to about 10 of them that are fare-free systems.
And then every other rural system like ours is just losing money on having a fare system.
A lot of them, not every other, it's system by system, but a lot of them are, yes. It's because it's a political, it's also philosophical. You're getting a service, every other service you get, you know, you generally pay. We've chosen in the country at the library, you don't pay for, unless you don't turn it in on time, you don't pay for checking out library books. It's the same, that same kind of I guess, philosophical value. Mason County made that decision. Every year, not every year, but it comes up from time to time, should we start looking at charging fares? We're in a situation where we're at 0.6%. The sales tax, you can go legally up to 0.9%, and then you have to go get special approval to go past it. You guys are already at 9%. So for you to bring service back in on your Saturdays, other services that were cut, to get these commuter, you're kind of between a rock and a hard place. And so, but you still have to make good decisions in terms of, will it pencil out, will you make money? I think the determination is, you know, is that you're gonna generate, you know, probably 4 or 6% positive revenue over it. I'm not so sure, and that's where I'm saying, that's system-wide. Doing it on a community basis, I know we generate a positive revenue, because again, we're not hiring extra people. It's built in with their jobs. It's such a small amount of work that has to be done to do that. The more routes you add it to, the more people it takes to do it, then it starts to become where is it going to make money or not.
Dennis, one thing. The fire district model is an insurance-based model. So I understand how that works, which is everybody pays in and then you hope you don't have an incident, and that's how it works out. Transit's different because everybody pays in, but you're having incidences every day, multiple times a day on a fixed route at a fixed time. So it's a different model. And so I appreciate the analogy, but one's based on an insurance model and one is based on a business model.
Can I step into this conversation for just 1 second, please? When we started this conversation with Ryan, one of the things that he emphasized was this is going to be a local decision. We're getting the help of our peers on describing what their experiences are. But when it comes right down to it, it's going to be up to this board to set the fare, to determine which routes are going to be pilot projects if we do the pilot project. And we will be able to work with Paul, and I just hope we can continue to rely on the rest of you for information, because you didn't invent the wheel, but you pretty much perfected the wheel as it relates to us. And we want to capitalize on that. We certainly don't want to spend $1 million going down the road that you guys have already paid for. We'd be happy to hitch our wagon to you. And so, as we go through this thing, let's keep in mind that this is going to be a local decision.
I got that, but what I was trying to figure out was when we hear the same types of feedback from different transit agencies and the same language, it means that they've already gone through some of these questions, and it does not make sense to me. It just doesn't. I hear everything you're saying. I understand why you're saying the startup cost and the return that you get is slow and may not pay for itself. I understand that you have to have a certain usership level at a certain price for it to pay for itself. Where I fall apart is that is true about every single product. And so what I don't get about transit and why it's so different is that, you know, it's true about any experience even. A concert sets its ticket price at a certain level in order to make money. A football game sets its ticket price at a certain level in order to make money. So what it does is it offers an experience that people are willing to pay for. So if what we're saying is we can't get enough users to pay for the cost of this experience, then I just fall apart on the fundamental value of the experience, I think.
I think part of it is that public transit is really in a large part a public good, so that the people who need it the most have the least ability to pay. And so that's why it's so heavily subsidized, but also, you know, fare collection offsets a portion of that, but it doesn't make money.
Right.
It really, and it never will. It doesn't even necessarily, I think once the systems are in place, and because they're complex systems too, it takes a while for them to, the amount of money that's brought in to even that out, as Dale was saying.
But the fare collections portion of it alone, you have your subsidy in there for the greater good. The fare collection portion of it alone should be able to make money. That's where I don't understand why the rate setting model doesn't work like the private sector. That's what I'm not understanding, is why can't you get the supply and demand price point to work out perfectly? Because we do it in every other product model throughout the country. People are willing to pay this much, this is what it costs, and we're not even trying to make a profit. We're just trying to get something, well, we are trying to make a little profit. But that's what's confusing to me, is why you can't set a rate without losing so much ridership to pay for a system that you're putting in place. To me, the costs are the costs, and then every place else in our country we say, this is what it's going to cost us, this is the amount of profit we're going to rate, and you set a price, and you know, I mean, that's just like, I didn't take very many economics classes, so I took the basic ones, and I'm pretty sure This supply and demand thing and price setting thing is like at the cornerstone of all of it. And that's what I'm like not understanding. Is why, even if you set the price at $10 a route and you had users fall off, there should be a price point that you set where your usership and your costs equal out.
There is a price point, but that price point is too high. That's,
But
if they did set it at $10, they would make a big profit
But what
or
I
a big
just, but what I
surplus.
tried
Or
to
no one
say,
would buy
Jim,
it.
is that in every other instance, there's a price where, yeah, you lose users, but you have enough buyers that that price equals out.
But you don't have that in public transit, because if the ridership falls off by 50%, you have to start cutting your fleet and cutting, you also cut all of the other subsidies by the amount of operator hours you have. If you reduce the demand to the point where you can't support even the existing operation, the operator hours, then the state tax funds go down also. And all of a sudden, you know, so we certainly don't want to reduce demand dramatically.
Can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
Just the thing, and this goes back where you mentioned it was a political decision as far as the setting of fares and whatnot. I've got a couple points to make. For starters, if you were to set the fares high enough to where the system could be self-sustaining without government subsidy and everything else, they set the fares high enough that then the people would go out and buy cars. The idea is it's a public service to provide a service for people who need it most and can afford it least, and that's part of it.
Rick,
But
Paul, your cost per trip was, you told us yesterday.
On average, I just did some quick calculations off of August numbers, and if you average out the entire thing, it's about $13 per ride is what it costs.
And the buses. Is that what you're saying? Not our bus service, not van.
I'm not, but the thing is, you look at it, okay, let's say for example, and you take the numbers from Camino, we're looking at 6,000 riders per month, and I don't know how many people are going, you know, from here over to Camino that would add into that. But let's just say if you cut that in half of them are using the 411. That's 36, that'd be 3,000 a month, that's 36,000 a year. If you sit back and charge $2 a ride, that's $72,000 a year. I cannot fathom the idea in my mind that it's going to cost me $72,000 a year to count that money. Which is in reality what you're saying. You're saying, no, you only get the small return or you don't get a return. If $36,000 or 36,000 people a year put $2 a ride into the box, it can't possibly cost. That would be saying it would cost $6,000 a month to collect your fare. And I can't believe that. I can't even fathom that. That just doesn't even, there's no way to pencil it out. But the other thing is the political part of it. Even if we don't make a dime on the fares, it has been communicated clearly to me by our representatives in Olympia that if Island Transit does not do something to show our representatives in Olympia that we are attempting to bring in alternative sources of revenue, of which fares is highly recommended, and we see that with the Everett grant proposal or contract, that our $2.3 million funding that we got, which pays for the 411 route, is going to go away. So if it costs us, even if we're at a break-even point, and it comes down to we get that subsidy or another county gets that subsidy, we're better off to charge the fare, not make any money on the fare, if it gets us money from another source. And that's the point.
And I think also when,
Go ahead.
I think also when talking about how high to set fares, we need to also consider some of the externalities that exist. You know, if you're going to raise fares to a certain point, there's going to be people who can't afford that. So what does that mean? That's going to be a lot of people who are trying to get to medical trips. That's going to be a lot of people who are trying to get to doctor's trips, some key services. That's going to fall out into other parts of the community. Also, if you set the fares too high, there's going to be more people taking cars. which is going to have a serious impact on the road right out there.
Well, not if your ridership on your buses is low. I mean, that can't actually be true. If you have low usership, you've already got those cars on the road, so you're not actually adding more cars.
I want to step into this conversation again.
I just don't want, I appreciate the rhetoric. I do.
I don't believe it's rhetoric.
Well, in that instance it is. It says if you lose usership, you're going to have more cars. If the issue is that you don't have enough ridership in the first place, you're not actually putting that many more cars on the road. And if the riders you're using are the ones that can't afford a fare, they're not affording a car, gas, and insurance either. So this is, and I know I sound argumentative, and I don't mean to, but what I'm trying to do is get down to the healthy business choices of what we're trying to do. And in order to do that, I need to push through some of these things that we say that are actually not logical. It's not logical to say the cost is that we're putting more cars on the road if the argument is that the people who are getting pushed off the bus system with the fares are the ones who can't afford to pay the fare. They don't have, it's still cheaper for them to pay a fare than to have a car, put gas in it, have insurance, and drive down the road. So the people you pushed off the system are not the ones that are putting cars on the road. And if the other people are getting off of the system, there's not that many of them anyway, or we wouldn't have to fully subsidize this to the degree we have to. So again, as we go through this conversation, there's a lot of public transportation support for greater good that doesn't make logical sense in the arguments. And I just want to push through those to get down to the facts of what the choice is. If it doesn't make good sense for business, that's a big concern for me. That's why I'm trying to push through this argument, is I don't know that I'm going to make a political choice, actually.
Well, we're going to get a chance to have that conversation on the board. You're going to have a chance to convince your peers.
I understand that. I'm just trying to explain why I'm
And
trying to
I
push.
get a chance to often buy you a glass of wine, and you usually see it
I
right
might
away
be-
when we have the glass of wine.
To your face, I do, at least. I mean, that's what I'm trying to push through, is that some of the things that are said to justify why we do what we do, actually, if you step back and look at those arguments, are a little nonsensical to me. And I think if you sit with your peer group and talk about how pushing people who can't afford a fare off of a bus increases cars on the road, you will find that that's illogical. And if your issue is that you have low ridership in the first place, how many cars are you actually putting on the road? So again, I don't mean to be a nightmare. I just want this to be a logical system as we make decisions, and I don't want rhetoric. It drove me crazy.
Okay, well, stay with us and don't drive yourself crazy.
Okay.
But Brian Lagerberg is here. He's with DOT, and he raised his hand back here to add something to the conversation. And if you would, please.
All right, thank you. So Jill, I have a couple responses for you. The reason WashDOT is interested in transit is because it creates a more complete system, it supports communities, it reduces the total cost of transportation. So in a specific instance, a bus route may not be taking a car off the road. In many, many instances it is. And it's a lower cost solution for us to provide transportation capacity. So there's lots and lots, the vast majority of the transfer routes in the state are more cost effective than the state investing in roadway capacity, maintenance, and preservation. We struggle to maintain and preserve the highway systems that we have today. And so we're looking for more effective and efficient ways to provide transportation services to support the communities. And that's why this is a local decision, though. This is your system. This is the values of your community. This is the specifics of your situation. We look at it at the higher level and we say we want a more complete system because that's more cost effective overall. But it isn't overall in those conversations. It's a specific situation. And so that's why it's your decision, not our decision. Because you're looking at the specifics, I'm looking at the aggregate. And I guess the other thing I'd like to add is I took a lot of economics. I TA'd economics at the University of Washington National School. One of the things that you've skipped over though is when you look at the price point for you to make the profit that you want to make. Most businesses fail, particularly over time. Almost all businesses fail over time because they can't continue to get the value or the market that they need to maintain their system. But what you're talking about here is a public good. You're providing values to your community. You're providing access to jobs for people who couldn't otherwise have access to jobs because they couldn't afford their car. And that's part of the importance of this, and the considerations that you need to think about is, what is that value to my community? I don't think you can afford to allow the transit system to fail. Therefore, the equation is slightly different than a strictly economic system. There's other aspects that come into play.
So I'm with you on that, but just on the whole system, I understand that part. It is on the fare collection piece of it. The fact that you could try to collect fares and not set that rate at a high enough level that it would pay for itself, that is confusing to me.
But I guess I'd encourage you to think about what Brad said in Mason Transit. What Brad said was they've identified the commuter routes as an opportunity for them to set the price high enough to recover the costs of the system. They have not been able to do that with their entire system because of the values that Mason Transit has, or Mason County has. They're providing the systems to support those values. They can't set a fare high enough for the local routes to achieve that. Therefore, they focus on those routes where it makes sense.
And Dale made the point too, that you are collecting 6%, a positive 6% on top of the cost of setting up the collection system.
Right, but
not 6% on the aggregate of the total system. And Brian, on your comment, and I think we philosophically have this obligation too, to be looking down the road, 20 to 40 years down the road. It is fact that we cannot build our way out of this traffic problem situation with the growth that we have in the Northwest, this region, with the load of asphalt. Sorry, Chuck, I know your family's selling us lots of asphalt, and I'm happy for you in that model. But simply there isn't enough space to accommodate the level of service that is required to keep traffic moving when we are a traffic-oriented society, a vehicle-oriented society. And at some point, we have to, at least I believe, we have to transition to where we have fairly strong public transportation systems that are interconnected with all modes of transportation and with other agencies. That is a model that works very effectively throughout Europe. They speak different languages. You can walk in there, pick up a color-coded card, and go wherever you want pretty easily. And it seems like we are struggling to reinvent this wheel when it's really not necessary. Our neighbors have already pretty much put the wheels on the wagon. 3 wheels on this cart, we just need to add 1 more wheel.
So, but the difference between Dale's model at 6% and Brad's model is significant. And so why I was focusing on Brad is that his system is rural. It's more like ours. Dale has the benefit of urban areas and a higher density of users per route. And so we're going to have the same types of ridership model, more like Mason County. And that's why I was trying to really push through and figure out how that system, why you wouldn't just set the price where it's at. And I understand that what it is that if the value is to keep the maximum number of riders on it based on income level, age, access, whatever, that you take what you can take and you don't set the price in order to make the profit. That's what you're saying.
But Ryan also said talked about the pilot project, phasing it, and then we tweak the system as we go.
Right. I understood all of that. I was not understanding any of that.
Do I have to give you another glass of wine?
No, I feel like I'm trying to communicate and I'm not very articulate, or that we're not listening. One of the two is true. I'm going to choose to believe I'm not articulate so that I don't offend anybody.
And you're generally a good listener.
I'm a pretty good listener.
Don't be so hard on yourself. But this comes under what, in a free society, we provide for our citizens. And there's a list. I mean, I can't even imagine what, and how do we pay for it? Through our taxes, our income.